Thanks, Priyank. That was a good introduction. Maybe I could use some of those words in my LinkedIn profile. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining into the session today, middle of the week and different time zones, evening for some after the days of hard work. Thanks again for joining in, and I hope I live up to the expectation that Priyank has set. Okay, without further ado, let me start with the topic, Introduction to Self-Healing Automation. So there's two introductions here. One is what is self-healing automation, and an introduction to one of the open source tools that is gaining momentum in today's automation arena. So let's move to the next slide. And just before we move on, like Priyank said, let's keep the session as interactive as possible. Drop in your questions. We'll try and answer as much. If I do not know any answer, I'll be happy to figure out the answer, or we could figure out the answers together. Let's build the community. And having said that, Priyank has started this amazing platform for people to come and share whatever knowledge of whatever new topics that you're aware of. So I'm doing the same, and I encourage everybody to do the same. Please join in, share the knowledge that you have, build a community, and that's what we are all here for. All right, without much ado, let's talk about the agenda. So we're talking about, we want to talk about the problem statement as to what is the problem that requires answers, which the self-healing automation is going to provide, obviously the goal associated there, and what exactly is self-healing automation, what are some of the use cases, and we look at Selenium, which is one of the open source solutions for the self-healing automation. Finally, we'll get to the question and answers. So before we move on, I want to understand in which segment do our participants belong to. So we have this poll that is going to be shared in the chat. So we want to understand, out of these 4 different segments, where do you think you belong?
The link is shared in the chat window. All of you, I believe, you should have access to the chat window. Click on the link and please participate in this poll. It'll help us, help Ravi to sequence out the discussion accordingly.
Correct. Thanks for that, Priyank. Yes, it will help me to gauge or to deliver the content that I have in a more meaningful way so that it's applicable to all audience segment that we've got. So while you are voting, if you've already finished voting, I will go to the next slide and keep it open for some time so that you can ponder over the evolution of testing and automation. Different years, different things were the in thing at that time. Maybe you can look back on when you joined and what was the state of automation, and have that nostalgia for some time while the polling is finished. We'll give another 30 seconds for voting, let's say.
Yeah, should be good.
Let me start sharing the voting results as well so that you get to know what's happening with the votes. All right, I think it's a fairly balanced, mixed group of audience that we've got today. All right, that's good to know. We'll give another last 10 seconds if somebody wants to take a look at the results and then get encouraged to vote if you have not already voted. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, last chance, 3, 2, 1. All right, so I'm assuming that everyone did vote before countdown started. So this is our results. So we have a fairly balanced and mixed set of audience, which is good to know, so that I will tailor the content accordingly. For people who are new, so if there's something that I am speaking with an assumption that you already know, please put a note in the chat and we can talk a little more in detail about that particular topic. People who are already experts in automation, please bear with me if I'm going for too basic explanations, and also if there's anything more that you can contribute or add to topic, please feel free. All right, let's go back to the slide. Okay, so I hope that you all enjoyed this particular slide and got to see where you joined and how things have changed from then on. Cool. Moving on. The problem statement. So for people who are completely new, what are we trying to solve here? So I've put some crude pictures here to make it as fun and as well, easy to grasp the concept. So let's say you have an application. So this is your application and this is your automation test, and you are interfacing with application with whatever tools and technologies that you've got. So let's assume this is running smooth for some time, and then you have this creative new developer who's joined in, and he's making changes to the application, and finally he comes out with a very jazzy looking, or very completely renewed application, which comes like this. So what do you do? What happens to your automation test? So you assume that the interface is in some particular state, but it is changed now. So obviously your automation test is going to fail. So this is the problem that we are trying to address using self-healing automation. So what's the problem? Is applications that are changing more frequently than what you would expect. And what is that causing? That is causing your automated tests to fail or be unstable. And if you have a CI pipeline, obviously tests failing over there is going to stop the deployments and etc. stuff going from there, which in turn, what does it require? It requires additional efforts to fix those failed tests and to maintain those tests in the longer run. I'm hoping that the problem statement is clear for everybody, right from somebody who's completely new to the automation arena to everyone else in the audience. And now what's self-healing test automation? So we have the problem, so what's the solution? So this self-healing mechanism of test automation is a solution to make your tests as reliable as possible. How do you do it? You are going to give it some intelligence so that it can dynamically change itself and adapt to the changing application. And what technologies would you require to give that intelligence to your automated tests? So that generally involves these artificial intelligence algorithms or machine learning, all these new next-gen algorithms that are made possible due to the advancement in cloud and other technologies. So in a nutshell, self-healing automation is giving the ability to your automated tests to repair itself and adapt to the change and continue with progressing the test rather than fail. Any questions at this stage? All right, I'm glad that the basic foundation is fairly clear to everyone. Now, what are the use cases? One, we're all working in agile development. So there's a lot of change that is happening every 2 weeks, right from requirements up until implementation and delivery. So if the application is changing frequently, obviously you want to write tests that are adapting to the changes themselves without your intervention. So that's definitely one of the use cases. The other use case is the content management based applications like Hybris, where you have this UI page, but the locators are updated based on where it is deployed. Also, the third type is any, let's say, web application that you are interfacing with, but then the page changes depending on the time of the day. For example, if it is after 6 p.m., then there is no after hour support, so the page displays something else. But during the normal regular hours, the page shows some other content. Such kind of applications which change with time or with some other event, those are definitely good candidates. Next is any project that requires localization where you have different languages being supported by the application. So the IDEs, which we'll talk about in a few seconds now, So those IDs are generated based on the language, which means you can't have a fixed ID to understand the page or the UI application that you are talking. So we have a few tools in the market already, and obviously this is just a very small subset. There are more coming out every day. Some of these are open source, some of them are partly source code is available, but anything built on top of it is not. Some of them are completely proprietary, and some of them are expensive as well. So in today's session, we are specifically going to talk about Selenium. Two reasons. One, it is open source. Second, I really like that name, Heal, and it is targeting Selenium application. So it's talking about healing the Selenium applications. So I think the name is very, very witty and appropriate, which I'm assuming that you all agree to. Cool. So what is this Selenium basically? It is an AI-powered open source library. What does it do? Basically, it is to enable this self-healing mechanisms on any Selenium-based test case. So Selenium is one of the other open source libraries that are available, which will allow you to automate your test cases. So Selenium is on top of Selenium, which will make those test cases reliable and dynamically changing based on the new locators that comes in the UI. And how does Selenium operate? It uses something called as a tree comparing algorithm. So what it is, we'll look at it in the next slide. Before we move on there, because we have a lot of new people, let me rephrase. We have a lot of people who are new to this technology. So let me tell you what is this DOM model. Let's assume this is the UI that you get on the screen. So how is the backend HTML? The HTML content behind looks like this. There's a table, there's a row, and all these tags that are associated. Basically, it looks like a tree where you have the topmost layer here, and each of them is basically a tree underneath it. So how does Selenium work? So our first question is, what is it that Selenium tries to solve? So Selenium is based on the locators of different fields in the UI. So what Selenium does is, from an automation perspective, it is going to identify, okay, this particular value here is called by a specific ID, or it can be identified using a specific class name. It can be identified using the flow from the top. So basically what it is doing is, in order to get to this field, let's assume TD, it is going to either rely on the identifier if there is one, if not any other form of locator to identify this particular node. And then if you want to add any value, if you want to add any input to it, you can utilize that and then assign a value. So during the demo, we'll get to see more of it. So what Selenium does is, it will try to learn the structure of the page, and then it will save it in its database. And when certain things change in that structure, it is going to rely on what it learned before of the structure that existed prior to that, and then come up with the new locator to identify that particular button or that particular entity. In this case, the button group, the button here is moved up. This was the original structure. Then it is moved up by removing these two. So Selenium works out how to navigate and traverse across to identify the new locator. There is a little more animated video here, animated slide set here. So let's go through it, and then if there's any questions around it, we can discuss after. So the candidates in this slide is, one is the application that is bound to change. Then you have your test automation framework, where you've got a list of, let's say, some of the tests which are going to talk to the application. And then we are going to introduce Selenium. There is a web component, and then the backend. The backend is basically a database on PostgreSQL. So your test automation framework, normally, happy day scenario, there is a locator that you already know. It is identified by the ID called button. So your test automation framework looks for that ID from the application. The application says yes, it's found because the button is there. So in a Selenium case, what happens is, that's another thing. I somehow find it difficult to pronounce Selenium, although I like the name. So I'm not sure how many more you would agree to that. So in this case, what happens is element is found, the details are the successful locator or successful case. It is sent to the Selenium web, which is sent to its backend, and it is going to update its algorithms to know the structure and all that is involved. Now let's look at the negative scenario where the button is changed or something in the application is changed. In this case, is the button, but we are still referring to the button using the old ID. What happens in this case? So your application test automation reaches out to the application as always with the same ID. So in this case, because button doesn't exist anymore, the application replies it's not found. And then what happens is your test automation framework is going to interact with Selenium, which is going to talk to the backend by giving that, yes, the page state is this, we don't have this particular ID. So in the backend, it is going to use the tree comparing algorithm and then get from the previous successful locator path and then supply the newly generated locator back to your automation framework. And using that, you will be able to reach to this new or changed locator. And test will proceed and succeed. Are there any questions? Or does anybody want me to repeat this specific slide? You can probably drop a note in the chat or the Q&A box. I'll give 10 seconds. Priyank, let me know because I'm not able to see the chat window at the moment. Please give me a hint.
There's one question. By using XPath, we can find it, right?
Yes. So finding it, everything remains the same. Just that what happens if the XPath itself is now modified because the entire structure is kind of different. So your Selenium activity is all going to be the same. Just that how do you generate or identify that new locator in whichever way it is changed, that is taken care by the machine learning component of the Selenium backend. So I think there was a question as saying that what is Selenium backend? We'll look at that in the next slide.
Okay, sure.
Any other questions at this stage? All right.
Do we have to repeat it for every test? Do we have to repeat it for every test?
No, we don't. So what happens is if you have, let's say, 50 test cases, the first time you have to run with Selenium on because it needs to learn your tests, it needs to learn your application, how it will look and feel on the structure and all that. But that's it. And then you leave it. Next time you run it, it is going to check if something changed. If something's changed, it is going to generate the new locator. Nothing's changed, it is business as usual. So from your perspective, you just do it once and that's the end of it. The beauty is if you have a Selenium application, the only change that you need to do other than dependency and installing all that, from a code perspective, the only change that you have to do is just 2 lines. So with that, automatically it is going to take care of all your self-healing. So we'll look at that a little more in demo. That will give you a better picture.
There are 2 more questions, Ravi.
Yeah.
How does the HLM backend provide the new element details? That is one. And I think the related question, how does the mapping work in the HTML backend?
So the mapping, how does it work? I think it is probably a little out of scope for this session because there's a lot of machine learning and like I said, tree comparing algorithm and other algorithms that are in place. So the first question, how does Selenium backend send the thing back into the test, is using the Selenium web. So there is a connection between the backend and the Selenium web. They are on the component, is provided by Selenium. So your application is going to integrate with the Selenium web, which will communicate with the Selenium backend.
Okay.
I think there was another question. What was?
A couple more are coming in. What is the performance impact?
So yes, there is going to be some performance impact, and for some of the specific structures, I think it is larger than normal cases. But the community and the the implementers, the original implementers of Selenium are fixing those performance issues. But again, it's not that it's going to take 2 minutes to come back with the locator. It's probably about a few seconds. And it's only for the first time when it identifies a new locator. And after that, it is going to save that, which means any subsequent visits, it is going to be faster.
Okay. The last question maybe for this pause. Should the new element be saved back to the HLMDB?
So the new element saving into the DB is automatic. You don't need to do anything. Selenium does it. But let's say the new element is going to be there for good, right? Which means in your test, you probably want to change it. Because the new element, for example, in this case, it is for the next foreseeable future, it will be called new button, which means you need to probably go and change this guy. If you don't change, all good. But if you make a conscious decision to change, then this is the change that you need to do. But there's nothing to be done from your side into Selenium backend. And I think there's another question, probably the last one that I don't answer. If the button itself is removed, then obviously your test is not valid. So you need to, that's a different case. So the Selenium or self-healing is for cases where the application is modified to an extent that your test should still continue. But if there's a massive change in the application itself, for which your test has to be updated, then that's a different case. So what I'm saying is your healing ability should be meaningful. If there's no button, if your test is still proceeding, then which means the test itself is not correct, right? Okay, so we'll move on from this slide. So what are the use cases for Selenium? One is because it is based on Selenium, anything that uses Selenium WebDriver and a UI test automation on Java. So there is work that has started to enable Selenium on .NET, but currently it is only for Java applications. Java test automation, basically. Then, like any other self-healing automation, this is applicable for any projects that have frequent UI updates or based on CMS, or projects that need localization support, where the IDs are going to be different for each language. So what do we need to do to integrate Selenium? So like I said, from a coding perspective, all you need to do is just 2 lines. But to enable Selenium, there are 3 steps you need to do. One is the web dependency, and you need to install the backend in Docker. And then there is if you have to run from Maven, then there's a plugin for that. The last line is initializing driver, which is the 2-line code change that you need to do in your automation tests. So the integration step is fairly straightforward, and you can integrate it at any point in the project. If you already have a running project, you can still integrate Selenium with very minimal effort, and get it started and working in probably less than an hour. Okay, so now let's look at the showcase. But before that, I'll quickly tell you how the showcase is structured. There are 4 runs basically. The run 1 is where everything is normal, your regular application is working fine. And then in run 2, some locators in the application are changed, so which means your test should fail. So this run 1 and run 2 in the first set is where there is no Selenium. So everything is working fine, but something changes and your test fails. In the second set, the run 1, we will enable Selenium, and then we let the test pass the first time so that Selenium can learn your structure, your UI, and all that what it requires for the algorithm. And then the run 2 will modify the application locators so that Selenium will enable your test pass. Okay. So as part of the demo, I had created a video thinking, if something goes wrong during the demo, then you should have a plan B. Because, after being in the industry for all these years, the one thing that I've learned is you should always have a plan B, especially for your demo, because things that work very well prior to the demos might not be the case in the demo. But while I was doing the video, I realized that the video is probably more better from a showcase perspective, because I was able to chop off all those waiting times for the building or the the compiling and waiting times to switch the windows and all that stuff. So let me play that specific video, and after the showcase, if there's any more stuff to be looked at, then we'll look at. I have the demo ready anyway. We can look at that later. But before we go there, I will quickly, in the interest of people who are new to this whole locator business in Selenium or in UI, I'll give a quick intro here. So this is the form that we are going to use for our showcase. So it's just fairly a basic form for billing and proceeding with it, and it will do a lot of validation for each of the field. Now in this UI page, so when we talk about field, so each of these fields are identified by a specific ID. Could be the ID, class, or XPath, like somebody said, or it could also be some attribute of a specific field. For example, credit card number is identified using the ID CC number. And if you look at the specific button, so this is identified again. So that particular button is identified by the text on top of the button, which says continue to checkout. So each of these identifiers will help the automated test to know what is the field into which it should put a value and automate further. So I'm assuming this is clear, and I talk about that again in the demo video. So we'll take a look at it and we'll come back if there's any more questions. So I think I'll have to reshare because I need to enable audio from my computer to be streamed. So let me quickly do that. Stop the sharing and then reshare once with the Okay, so if you're not able to hear the audio, please let me know. I'm going to play the video.
For the purpose of the demo, we will use this form. It is a simple form which will take your billing address, the payment details, and then there's a button to continue to check out, which will do all the validations for us and complain if any of these fields are not filled in. When all the fields are properly filled in and you click the button continue to check out, the form, all it will do is add this parameter into the URL, and that's it. That's the end of the test that we are going to verify if the form filling was correct and complete from our automation. So I have a test here which is going to fill in the form with all the details that I'm passing from this test to the Java program, which is going to identify every element from the UI and enter the values that is being passed from this test. So if you look at the form here again, and if we look at the locators for each of these, so CC number is the ID for this particular credit card number, and that is what is being used here by this program to identify the element and enter the value. Look at the CVV, for example. So it's CC-CVV, so that is what it is. And for the continue to checkout, so it is identified by using the text on top of the button. So this is the text on top of the button, which is continue to checkout. Now, let's run the program. The test is going to fire on Chrome browser. So let me run it. The test will open the Chrome browser, start filling in all the values that we provided in the test, and then hit the submit button. The test will pass because we are filling in all the valid values. Yep, passed. If you look at it, the test is passed and it's all okay. Okay, now let's see what happens if the identifier for any of these fields are modified. So let's go ahead and change it, the credit card name to card name, similarly the number as card number, And let's leave the expiration as it is. Let's change the CVV. Similarly, let's also change the button. Instead of continue to checkout, let's do submit to checkout. I'm going to save it. Let's look at the modified form. So if you look at it, the button is already changed. Let's look at the credit card number. Yes, it's instead of CC number, it's changed to card number. We also modified CVV. So it is card CVV. So you should also see the name being changed from CC name to card name. We did not touch expiration, so that is still going to be CC hyphen expiration. Cool. Now let's fire our test again and see what happens. So like before, it is going to open the Chrome browser and try to find those particular fields using the IDs or the locators and enter the values. But in this case, it won't be able to find some of those identifiers, and obviously the test failed. So if you look at it, it's the first field that it is not able to find. It is just putting a error on that and quitting. So the test is failed. So CC name, that's the one that is modified now to card name. Let us rerun the test from the beginning, but this time let's involve Selenium so that it can learn the original IDs and the page structure. So a couple of things we need to do is firing up Selenium, which I've already done. So if you see my Docker desktop, you can see the database and Selenium backend is running. The other bit of change to be done is just replace your Chrome driver and use it as a delegate and pass it to the Selenium driver. I'm going to save it, and of course I've also done the changes, reverted the changes we did to this particular page. The CVV expiration we had not touched, the card number back to CC number, the card name CC name, and I can show you that the change is reverted on the front end. This is to continue checkout. The CVV is CC underscore CVV, card number is CC hyphen number. So it's all back to square one. And remember, this particular run is only to let Selenium learn about the current IDs and build the structure in its database. So I'm going to fire it. Browser is initiated. It's going to fill in all the values. And hit the submit button. Test will pass, no surprises here. Yep, the test is passed. Okay, now let's put Selenium to test. So we'll go ahead and modify the fields that we had changed earlier. So let's do the card name, card number, leave the expiration as it is, CVV, and also let's change button. So saving it, let's refresh the page. So you see all the changes that has happened here. Card CVV and similarly card number, card name, and those fields have been modified. All right, so let's see how Selenium cooks up with the changes. I'm going to run the test. Browser is being opened. Test is going to fill in all the values in there. Moment of truth. So it is talking to the backend Selenium because it's not able to find the values. So if you see, it's identified that those particular IDs have changed, which is why it is marking them as red, and it is identified the replacement, and then it's able to pass the test. So if you look at it, the test is passed, everything is good. So it's all the messages and warnings that it's saying that it's not able to locate, and it's talking to the backend and getting a new locator, identifying it and putting the value. So it's all Good. Now that you have all seen how Selenium works and provides the updated locators and helps the test continue without failing, let's look at the next important aspect, which is reporting. We need to know which identifiers have changed or which locators have changed, right? So obviously you can't look at the logs for all of the changes. So there's a better way to do it. You can have the Selenium reporting dependency built in through Maven and then fire the tests from here. So let's look at what happens now. So the testing part and replacing the missing locators part is all same. The important change will be with respect to reporting. So let's wait for the test to finish, then we'll look at the report. So nothing new here. It's still trying to figure out the values for those fields that have changed. The test is now passed with the new locators from Selenium. And it's also going to give us a nice little report here. So it's 4 fields is what we had changed, or the IDs for those. So it's going to tell you what was the locator value before and what is the new generated by Selenium, along with a nice little screenshot to show which particular value, which particular field we're talking about, those locators changed. And there's also this nice success and failure button here, which you can instruct Selenium. For example, if there's a false positive, you can mark it as a failure so that this particular feedback will be sent back to Selenium backend and it will update its algorithm accordingly. One last bit that I want to cover is regarding the properties for the Selenium project. So there is all these variables that you can update to modify the way your system or your solution is configured. The server host and port, specifically if you want to run the backend on a different host or port. The heal enabled is true or false if you want to disable the healing, and these top 2 properties are specific to the way the algorithm works with respect to the probability and the recovery.
All right, so I'm hoping that the demonstration did not put you to sleep. Any questions at this stage?
There is appreciation, Ravi. Somebody saying bravo.
Bravo to
All
the
right.
folks who developed Selenium. So I'll pass on all the credit to them.
Right. So quick question. There is one more question. If we change the tree format, will this work?
It depends again on whether or not the algorithm understands the change. So that is why there is this score, which is the probability, the matching score and all that stuff. So for a very, very complicated structure, maybe not. But again, it is still an it's still in evolution. So any such defects or any such issues, please report it to the Selenium folks so that they can improvise the algorithm.
Ravi, you want to is there an easy way to showcase how it can be reported?
You need to go to their website and then you just have to send them an email or send them a tweet or whatever saying that this is my structure and for whatever reason this is not working.
Okay.
So it's an open source project, so it is built on the feedback from the community. It doesn't just need to be your issues. If you've got any more ideas, any more improvisations that you could do for the whole solution, please feel free to send them to the folks.
There are a couple of questions coming in. Ravi, I'll read them out.
Yeah.
Developers can intentionally or unintentionally change the locators. What if it's done unintentionally? The tool will still pass the test, right?
Correct. So that is one of the pitfalls. So you have to be a little mindful to make sure that the genuine product defects are not bypassed. So if normally if you have any specific policy that only specific locators have to be used, or specific kind of locators, or if there's a specific pattern for the locators to be used, then those kind of tweaks needs to be added into your test. Otherwise, what Selenium will just do is, okay, we're not able to reach this specific button or this specific field, so let's see how we can reach that. So it is up to you how you write your test to make sure that any genuine product issues are caught.
Okay, one more question, Ravi. Does the Selenium store various versions of the DOM tree?
Yes and no. I think it intelligently, it's not just versioning. There is more to it in that algorithm. Basically, if you are really interested how the algorithm works, you probably will have to start the SCH, the tree comparison and other associated algorithms, because it's a mix of that along with the weights for each level of your tree. So there's a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence built into that. So there's no yes or no answer to your question. So yes, but then it's not just simply maintaining the versions.
So I kind of got curious while watching this whole webinar. What kind of a scale has already been tested? You know, it could be in your experience. What kind of a scale application has been tested?
Specific to Selenium, you mean, or in general? Okay.
Yeah, specific to
So
Selenium.
I know there are a lot of other open source libraries that are using this, and given the popularity of the other open source projects, I am guessing it is to a good scale, which is why some of these performance issues have been reported from those which the folks are working on to fix. So I don't have an exact number saying that, okay, 30,000 tests are passing in 2 hours or something like that, if that is what you're looking for. But from a popularity perspective, I think it is picking up and it is going to grow a long way.
Okay, okay. Do you know how many number of pages in an application or things like that?
That can they have any specific limitation to that?
Okay.
It depends on how your test case is also structured to a large extent.
Okay, okay.
All right, anything else? Cool. So we'll move to the last.
One question that's popped up now.
Yeah, sure.
Is Selenium certified to use on software as a service, SAS?
So it is open source, but I can't remember on top of my head if it's Apache license or anything else. You might want to check with the kind of license. And then on cloud, definitely you can use it. But then, if you're talking about SAS, whether it's a commercial app that you're talking about, or just for personal use, depending on what it is.
An ERP package, an ERP basically.
So when you say an ERP, so it's the ERP that you're targeting to test. Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah.
You have an ERP, and how are you currently testing? So you must have built some test cases using Selenium or something, right? So Selenium mostly works on Selenium. So if you have your Selenium tests that are working for your ERP, then your Selenium should also work, as long as it's it's built on top of Selenium.
One more question, an acknowledgement to the previous question, but now the different question altogether. Can you use Selenium for database testing, which is not involved in any UI related testing?
Probably not at this stage, but there are work being going on to enable database, and mobile is enabled, but then it's not as strong at this point from what I know. So a lot of new things are being added. So watch out the space. I'm sure database is going to be in there soon. But having said that, there are other tools which cater to database tests as well. Should we move on?
Yeah, I think so. We can move on.
All right. So for people who are interested, so a lot of stuff is available online to try out, including the application that I used for the demonstration. And there is an IDE which helps you to update your code just by the click of a button. So I leave that as an assignment to people who are interested to integrate that plugin and then try out yourself as to how you can change the locator in your code from Selenium. So there was a question in earlier saying that how do we update in the Selenium database? So you don't need to do anything in the database. You might want to do it in the code if you know that this is the new locator is how it is going to be maintained going forward. Then to update in your code, you can take Selenium's help to get the new locator automatically. So give it a go. And if you hit any issues, please feel to reach out directly to me or through Aritha, and we'll be able to sort that out for you. So what's the summary here? So self-healing test automation, you all saw the benefits already. So what does it do? So it helps reduce the downtime, improve the speed of development, obviously. Automation teams will put more effort in writing new test cases than fixing or maintaining the existing test cases. And it'll let you build your automation and achieve higher engineering excellence. So I'm hoping that you all learned something today. If not, at least the fact that if you've not found it useful, I'm hoping you at least understood a bit or two about what we're trying to solve here. And I'll repeat again. So we are all trying to build a community here. So if you've got two things, I would encourage. One is if you got any ideas for improvement for Selenium, please send out a note to the folks. It's open source. Try it out. Any sort of feedback, new functionality that you look for, or any bugs that you see, send the feedback to them. And the second one is come forward to give any presentation of any topics. Aritha, I'm sure is giving a nice platform to all of you. If there's any topic that you would like a session on, please reach out, send a note to Aritha. I think they already have a backlog of different requests that are coming, so they'll try and get the right people to address those specific topics as well in the future. So last Q&A, anything at all? Sorry, say that again.
Certainly, any topics that you want to share with the larger community, please reach out to us. You have our email addresses. You've been visiting our website. You can also get connected to us on LinkedIn. My name is Priyank and the speaker is Ravi. We have put up a brief introduction in our website as well. So do get connected, and this conversation that began today need not end with the webinar. We can certainly continue the conversation and explore the tool together and also contribute back to the community, either in terms of using Selenium or finding out issues and reporting it to the Selenium community that is developing it. We can reach out to Ravi also through LinkedIn. Ravi, if they have any questions, if the audience have any questions, someone might get connected to you. It has happened in the past also whenever we have organized the webinars. So that is all from our side. I don't see any questions coming in. And I think there are appreciations coming in.
Thanks for that. And like I said, all credits, I'll share it with the open source community and also to Aritha for enabling this platform. I thank everybody for joining in today and keep learning, keep rocking.